Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching this presentation. We are Irasema Mora-Pablo and Edgar Emmanuell García-Ponce from Universidad de Guanajuato in Mexico. And today we will present this study that explores the perspectives of 42 undergraduate students concerning the role of TOEFL ITP in higher education. In order to promote the internationalization of education and professional mobility, higher education worldwide has seen the need to increase opportunities for students to develop the English competence. To ensure that students upon graduation meet desired linguistic objectives, universities commonly used standardized tests. In the context of the present study, TOEFL ITP is used for entry and exit purposes in undergraduate and postgraduate programs. However, it is still unclear how students view this requirement and the academic support for obtaining the expected scores. For this presentation, this is our outline. First, we will present the background of the study, and we will talk about English language learning in Mexico. And later, we will discuss the role of TOEFL ITP in Mexican higher education. We will continue by explaining the research design of this study, its context, participants, and then we will present the results, our discussion, and conclusions, and we will finish by providing recommendations for higher education. We will start by discussing English language learning in Mexican higher education. Globalization has impacted on higher education worldwide. Because of this, higher education has attempted to plan and deliver disciplinary content with a view of preparing professionals with knowledge and competencies with high standards. With the objective of meeting international standards, higher education worldwide has directed efforts towards strengthening academic mobility, research, and insertion into the labor market. To attain this, the teaching and learning of English as a foreign language has received significant attention from students, teachers, university authorities, policymakers, and employers. The reasons for this is that English is considered to be the means that promotes opportunities for university students to get jobs in the highly competitive labor market in political, economic, scientific, or academic fields. To this end, English as an international language plays a significant role because it is a tool used for communication and social relations around the world. Considering the value of the English language, higher education in different contexts of the world has gone through continuous substantial reforms to increase the English proficiency of university students and graduates. In Mexico, the manufacturing sector from international companies has grown considerably, especially in the Bajío region, having a positive impact on its economy. In order to respond to the demands of this economic phenomenon, the Mexican government has conducted substantial changes and improvements in terms of infrastructure and communications. Given the important role of English as an international language, the education of English has also gone through reforms to meet international standards. These reforms have impacted on how English is taught and learned, and the English proficiency that students are required to demonstrate before and after the undergraduate and postgraduate programs. Because of the key role that English plays as an international language, the English proficiency requirements have changed in Mexican universities. Currently, having a strong academic background and high proficiency in English are key to finding jobs in the competitive Mexican labor market. And graduates need to show competency in levels such as B1, B2, or C1 according to the Common European Framework for Languages. Those practices, resources, and infrastructure are now focused on preparing future graduates and professionals who have not only the knowledge required by these disciplinary areas, but also the English proficiency required in the labor market, which has become more and more competitive. However, graduates have faced several challenges that are a consequence of a complex interplay of factors. For example, it has been reported that in Mexican higher education, there are limitations in terms of pedagogic flexibility, internationalization practices, and technological infrastructure. There is also the prevalence of old-fashioned teaching methods and other factors related to the low socioeconomic status of students and large classes, which have limited universities from attaining the expected proficiency of students and graduates. These limitations have impacted on limited English skills of graduates and professionals in Mexican higher education. This has been corroborated by the Mexican Institute for Competitiveness, which claims that only 5% of the Mexican population speaks and understands English. The consequence of students and graduates' limited proficiency is that they face difficulties to find a job since they do not show the necessary skills to communicate fluently in English. In turn, the reduced opportunities in the competitive labor market become a threat to Mexico's economy because this often results in less and less jobs available for these graduates. It is therefore necessary to conduct context-sensitive examinations with a view to promoting English language education in Mexican higher education, which is of quality and also centered on the learner and based on realistic institutional objectives, which have an impact on the immediate and long term. Now, about the role of the TOEFL ITP, we know that in order to evaluate the progress of students' language competence and therefore the attainment of expected linguistic objectives, higher education institutions commonly use standardized testing such as TOEFL, which is a test administered to measure the level of English proficiency of non-native speakers of English. Some authors have explained that the popularity of TOEFL is because it follows the same purpose. And what is that purpose? Measure the English proficiency of non-native English speakers. TOEFL ITP is designed to evaluate the English proficiency in academic settings with progress monitoring specifically listed as one of the proposed uses of the TOEFL ITP scores. The test only includes 3 sections: listening, structure and written expression, and reading comprehension. Considering the importance of standardized testing and the relevance of TOEFL ITP in Mexican higher education, a critical evaluation of the TOEFL ITP test from the user's perspective is very important in the validation process of the test. This would allow to guide and to help test users' actual understanding of appropriate test use and potential decisions that they make based on the test scores required by the institutions. However, there has been limited research to date examining perceptions of TOEFL ITP and institutions' actual uses of these assessments. Now, Emmanuel will explain the study, its research design, context, and participants.
Okay, thank you very much, Irasema. Well, the study was conducted at the University of Guanajuato in central Mexico, a large public institution with approximately 34,000 students at bachelor's, master's, and doctorate levels, and with over 150 programs on offer across various disciplines. Whereas English is the main language taught as a second language, there is also some strategies to promote other languages, other foreign languages. The English courses offered at this university cover a range of proficiency levels from A1 to B2, approximately 8 levels in total. A university-wide English language testing policy has been recently introduced, requiring a demonstration of English language proficiency with TOEFL ITP, either for exit or admission purposes for the majority of programs. Undergraduates, for example, need to show evidence of a TOEFL ITP report for exit, whereas postgraduate programs require TOEFL ITP for admissions. Through open calls posted on social media and directly sent to program coordinators, the students from this university were invited to participate. We received responses from students from a number of undergraduate and postgraduate programs. However, for this study, we only considered the responses of 42 participants from humanities and sciences programs, 18 humanities students and 24 sciences students. The reason of this was the high proportion of participation from those discipline areas, which would allow us to understand how the role of TOEFL ITP is viewed through a comparative analysis. With the purpose of capturing students' views on the role of TOEFL ITP, a web-based questionnaire was administered. According to Wright, online questionnaires are useful because they allow researchers to gain access to individuals and groups who would be difficult to reach through other means and channels. The link to the questionnaire was sent out to the students, and the link was active for approximately 2 months. The data was then transferred to an Excel file, which allowed us to organize and prepare them for analysis. To do this, Gary and Bernard make reference to the repetition of words, metaphors, identification and shift in content as a resource to identify participants' constructs and meaning making. Based upon this idea, we only consider those segments in which the participants appear to be discussing their views on the role of ITP in their academic and professional decisions. Now, it's time to present the results from the online questionnaire. Let's start off with the views on English language learning. In all the responses obtained from the online questionnaire, it was evident that the participants from both discipline areas were aware of the benefits of learning English. For academic purposes, both groups of students expressed that having English proficiency enables them to have access to information in English. A high number of responses also pointed to the importance of English competence for professional purposes. For example, these extracts show this importance attributed to English. These extracts also show that besides academic reasons, English is perceived by the participants as a tool to have access to better jobs in the labor market. In general, these responses suggest the students' positive attitudes towards the learning and use of English for immediate academic and professional needs. As in the case of the English language, the participants suggested responses which indicated positive attitudes towards the use of TOEFL ITP in their undergraduate programs. These positive attitudes are suggested in these extracts. The students perceive that the score that they obtain in TOEFL ITP will be useful for demonstrating the proficiency level that they have. Some of the reasons that they provide are to have a competitive profile, to show a standardized level of English, to show readiness for the labor market, among others. When asked about their perceived English proficiency, 11 participants from both discipline areas claimed that the major limitation that they face is that they do not have the English proficiency required by their undergraduate programs. Despite the fact they are aware that there are resources available in the university, a number of participants felt that their English proficiency was low. We were unable to examine the resources that are available to students in this university context, but their responses indicated three main factors which hinder them from developing English proficiency and thus reaching expected TOEFL ITP scores. The responses point to three main factors that limit them from developing English proficiency and thus obtain the expected TOEFL ITP scores. For example, the lack of time to practice the language, heavy academic workloads, and a lack of frequent practice. And these responses come as a surprise because they contrast with their initial views on the importance of the language and the use of TOEFL ITP. At the beginning, the responses appear to value the benefits of learning English and TOEFL ITP, but these other responses contradict their stated endorsement of the language learning for academic and professional purposes. The results obtained from the online questionnaire administered to 18 humanities students and 24 sciences students suggested that English language learning was viewed as an asset for academic purposes and professional opportunities. Since the discipline areas are different, we expected to see clear-cut differences in terms of the students' views on the language. However, the 42 participants appear to support the institutional strategy to learn the second language and develop proficiency for the national and international labor market. Their views also appeared to be similar regarding the use of TOEFL ITP. In other words, their responses suggested positive attitudes towards the standardized test as a requirement for graduation. However, in spite of the positive attitudes towards the English language and the TOEFL ITP test, the students' responses suggested perceived limitations in terms of their English proficiency, which is expected in their undergraduate programs. The participants suggested three factors: time constraints, lack of practice, and heavy academic workloads. The contradiction with their initial views on the language and TOEFL ITP might suggest that institutional strategies should be formulated to promote students' language learning autonomy. From students' responses, some recommendations were offered. Number one, provide training courses for TOEFL ITP. Number two, include activities in English classes to prepare them for TOEFL ITP. Three, increase the expected level of English proficiency for graduation. Number four, more courses and greater flexibility of English courses. Number five, promote English for specific purposes. And the last one, teach content classes in English. We believe that these recommendations should be considered by the institution in order to promote students' language proficiency and the scores expected by the educational programs. The implementation of these recommendations and their continuous evaluation would help inform realistic second language strategies and objectives stipulated in both the institutional development plan and the university's educational model. Well, thank you very much. Here are some references. Thank you very, very much.